miss your old familiar friends, but waiting just around the bend. Everywhere you look, there's a heart, there's a heart.
Okay, well, reports are coming in that the mandated title defense of the WBC champion Deontay Wilder against Dominic-Breazeale, his mandatory challenger, that's going to be billed as a pay-per-view. And the initial reports are citing the fact that Deontay Wilder has been made a sizable guarantee by the people over there at Top Rank, by the people over there at ESPN, and this is Showtime's attempt to stay in Deontay Wilder's good graces. Essentially, they're incentivizing a situation for him so that he'll stay on their side of the street. And these initial reports are per Mike Kopinger of Fox Sports and Ring Magazine. These are my thoughts. Well, this very much to me seems like an act of desperation on the part of Showtime. They see that Deontay Wilder proclaimed to the entire world, to the boxing community and anyone at large that is willing to listen, that he is a network free agent, that he can fight anyone, anywhere. And while these comments are from the horse's mouth, they directly go against the situation that Deontay Wilder's been involved in. Deontay Wilder is one of the bigger names on Showtime in the realm of boxing. That's one of their main guys, one of their draws.
You can't lose him.
And the last thing they want is for him to end up going to ESPN and Top Rank. I mean, they don't want that. If he goes over there, where does that leave them? For that reason, this reads like an act of desperation, that even though this fight is not pay-per-view worthy by any stretch of the imagination, even though this fight, as a pay-per-view, has the potential to flop, they're willing to stage it anyway to satisfy Deontay Wilder, to incentivize a situation for him so that he will stay on their side of the street. And I'll tell you that this news really caught me off guard. It caught me by surprise because I didn't think for a second they would try to build this fight as a pay-per-view event, because it's not pay-per-view worthy. Dominic-Breazeale and Deontay Wilder, they do have their bad blood. They do have some history due to an incident that took place in a lobby post-fight. We're all aware of it. But that in and of itself does not spice up this fight so much that you can justify billing it as a pay-per-view, especially in today's pay-per-view market. I mean, we see what two more popular fighters than Deontay Wilder and Dominic-Breazeale, we see what they did in the pay-per-view market. I'm talking about Manny Pacquiao and Adrian Broner. Two guys who have been talked about for a much longer time, a much longer duration than Wilder and Breazeale, and yet all they did in this market was 400,000. We look at Wilder's fight with Fury, and you guys had to conjure up Tyson Fury and give him half the pot so that you could do a mere 325,000 buys. So what do you think a fight between Wilder and Breazeale is going to do? Do you think it's going to do better than that?
Not likely.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not saying this to slight Deontay Wilder. I'm not saying this to slight Showtime. I'm just being completely honest when I say that this fight has the potential to be a monumental flop. It does.
Seriously.
This is not a pay-per-view fight. It's not. And I think even Wilder's fans can admit to that. I mean, what are they going to charge you guys to watch this fight? To watch a fight with Dominic-Breazeale, who is neither the most skilled or the most exciting guy. I mean, this guy's got the personality of warm applesauce. He's not the gregarious showman that Tyson Fury is. Tyson Fury, who largely in part helped sell that fight between him and Wilder. Breazeale is none of those things. He's not a showman. Not inside the ring and not outside of the ring. So the fact that they would actually try to charge people, what are we talking about? $64.99, $75.99? What are we talking about? The fact they're willing to go through with this to satisfy Deontay Wilder, to match any offers that he may be receiving from other outfits, it does read like an act of desperation.
Know what y'all gotta do.
You compare the management or mismanagement of Deontay Wilder's career in retrospect with that of his peers like Tyson Fury, who's set to be making a whole lot of fucking money here stateside, Anthony Joshua, who's also set to bank a career-high payday here stateside. You look at those things, you analyze those elements, and how that might look from where Wilder's sitting at. Look, I've been around longer than this guy, and he's making substantially more money than I am. So you guys have got to do something for me to keep me on this side of the street, because I'm definitely considering what they are offering. And that might be the reason that even though this fight has the potential to be a big flop, Showtime is willing to do it to satisfy the needs of Deontay Wilder. Now, that doesn't guarantee that he's going to walk away with a whole lot of money. That's just the truth of it, because you're leaving yourself subject to the pay-per-view market, the unstable, unreliable American pay-per-view market. You're leaving what you could be making in the hands of the audience at large. And the audience at large may not feel that your fight with Brazeale is worth the price tag. They might not. So there's no guarantee that Wilder's going to be getting an inordinately high amount of money, or that this fight will match the offer that he received from Top Rank at ESPN. There's no guarantee that he's going to make that, because that is being left in the hands
of the people,
of the American pay-per-view market. I'll tell you in a heartbeat that I'm not buying this fucking fight. It's not a pay-per-view worthy fight. And who do they have on the PBC side of the street? What fights could they orchestrate in-house? Because that's what they like to do. They don't want to have to deal with anybody. So those things in mind, what fights could they orchestrate? What situations could they put together for the undercard to spice up the card?
Beats me.
Fights between who? I'll tell you, short of a Gary Russell versus Leo Santa Cruz fight, short of a Jarrett Hurd versus Tony Harrison or Jamal Charlo fight, I don't see what they could really do to spice up the card, to make this intriguing enough that people are willing to pay for it. So my thoughts on this are, if they go through with this, if they really plan on making this a pay-per-view event, it's out of desperation. It would have to be. It would have to be out of desperation. In other news, I'm sure most of you have heard already that it's official. Golovkin has crossed over to the DAZN side of the street, and their global vision perfectly matched his goals. It appears that he's got a 6-fight global partnership between himself and DAZN for his promotional company, Triple G Promotions, which will see Golovkin fighting twice a year on the platform for the next 3 years. Golovkin is no longer going to be fighting on pay-per-view, similar to Canelo Alvarez's situation. He opted out of the pay-per-view market for the guaranteed cash. And this move comes as no surprise. There's been wide speculation the last couple of weeks and months that this is where Golovkin was going to end up because, well, it's the most logical choice for any free agent in the middleweight division. This is the place to be. Canelo's over there, and along with Canelo, all the world championships, all the world titles are over there. So any middleweight that has any aspiration of becoming a world champion or squaring off against a big name, that's the place to be. Now I'm going to tell you something, because this is a recurring theme throughout several weight classes. The whole stigma of having to cross the street for fights, cross promotional issues, cross network issues. I'm not telling you guys that everybody should always have to cross to some opposing side of the street to get a fight. I'm of the opinion that given the structure of the sport of boxing, when a big fight rolls around, and that fight involves 2 different guys that are on 2 different networks or are with 2 different promoters, I'm of the opinion that it is those promoters and those networks' responsibility to find a middle ground. So understand, I'm not promoting that anyone monopolize all the talent in a weight class. I'm just saying that in order to avoid many of the issues that we see in different weight classes, many of the pitfalls that sometimes prevent fights from happening, depending on which promotional company we're talking about, in order to avoid that shit,
this is an option.
This is an option. This is a way to go. For Gennady Golovkin, who's no spring chicken.
He's getting older.
And, he's a career middleweight. This was the natural, the obvious, and the logical choice. So there's no surprises here. Now, I have no doubts that a part of this 6-fight deal, I have no doubts that in some way, shape, or form, I think that Canelo Alvarez is going to be a part of that deal. Not sure how soon we can expect to see a fight like that. We know that Canelo Alvarez has his hands tied right now with the Jacobs fight going down in May. And who knows what he'll decide to do after that, because I'm of the opinion that now that DAZN has both of those guys on the same side of the street, they're going to try to build it up a bit. They're not just going to rush right into a rubber match. Perhaps what they'll do is let Golovkin have 1 or 2 tune-ups before they bring that rubber match into fruition. That may be the way to go, because independent of each other, you understand, independent of Canelo and independent of Golovkin, both of those guys have the ability to put a lot of asses in a lot of seats independent of each other. This will allow DAZN to stage several cards for Canelo, for Golovkin. Independent of a fight between them, a rubber match, independent of that, you can put together a lot of successful cards in the in between time while you're building up the rubber match.
For both fighters.
And that's more or less what I think DAZN, the people over there at DAZN, that's more or less what I think they're going to do. That's how I think they're going to handle it. They're going to allow Gennady Golovkin to have 1 or 2 tune-up fights before they move forward with a rubber match. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, where does that leave everybody else? Where does that leave all the other middleweights that aren't on the DAZN side of the street? Where does that leave Rob Brandt, Ryota Murata, Jermall Charlo? I'll tell you where it leaves them. Just because those guys are not on that side of the street doesn't mean that they can't get a title shot. I mean, that's what purse bids are for. That if the powers that be, the alphabets, the sanctioning bodies, stipulate that Guy A is supposed to fight Guy B and you guys have got to reach a deal by this date, that's what the purse bid is for, and whoever wins the bid
will promote the event.
They'll be the one to stage the event, and that will determine where the fight takes place. So it's not like all hope is lost just because all the world titles are on one side of the street. At the end of the day, those kinds of fights are still viable. The only issue, to be quite honest, is the willingness, and you know, I know there's going to be some people out there that don't like this, but the only real issue is the willingness of the PBC, for example, to allow their guy to fight on a different platform. If it ever came down to a purse bid situation between, let's say, Jermall Charlo and Gennady Golovkin, I have no doubts that DAZN would flex their A-side muscle to make sure they win the bid and get the fight.
Hypothetically speaking.
I've got no doubts about that. But the people over there at the PBC, they may have the foresight to realize that and try to avert that situation altogether to make sure that their guy, Jermall, doesn't end up fighting on DAZN. In other words, it's possible that they may choose to forego a situation like that altogether and just try to find Jermall someone else to fight, because they know if it goes to a purse bid situation between Jermall and Golovkin or Jermall and Canelo, DAZN's likely to win the bid.
And get the fight.
And they may not want to see one of their boys end up on that side of the street, even for a one-off. I want you guys to understand something. I am actually a proponent of Jermall Charlo getting his title shot. I'm actually a proponent of that. I've said that on many videos, that the WBC, they kind of screwed him over. Instead of ordering that he get the winner of the fight, which is how it's supposed to work, the winner of the Golovkin versus Canelo rematch, rather than ordering that he get the winner of that fight so that he can thereby get his title shot, they ordered him to fight the loser, knowing that that fight is not likely to come off, that Golovkin does, you got no leverage against him. You have no leverage to enforce that sanction. And in that way, it's a bullshit order, because Jermall Charlo is due a title shot. Not simply a Golovkin fight. No, he's due a title shot. And rather than giving him his title shot, the WBC ordered him to fight the loser of the fight. So understand something. I'm actually a proponent of Jermall Charlo getting his title shot. But at the end of the day, there are certain realities to be addressed. And one of those realities is that while he, the fighter, he and the immediate members of his team, while they may be willing to go where they've got to go to get a fight with a big name, while they might be willing to do that, the umbrella that they fight under might not feel the same way. That's saying that while Jermall maybe he's willing to go to DAZN, maybe he'd be willing, but the people over there at the PBC, the higher ups, Tim Smith, Al Heyman, they may not be crazy about that idea, even though Jermall Charlo, for Jermall Charlo, what have you guys got?
Not a lot.
I mean, I think something very similar applies to both Marcus Brown, who defeated Badou Jack very recently, and Badou Jack. The people over there at the PBC have no world titles for either Marcus Brown or Badou Jack to fight for. 3 of the world titles in the light heavyweight division are on the top rank side of the street, and we already know that the PBC and Top Rank, they have a very fractured relationship. The only other title is on DAZN. The question then becomes, do you think that the people over there at the PBC would be willing to let Marcus Brown or Badou Jack cross the street for at least one fight so that he gets a shot at a world title? That's the question. Do you think that they'd be willing? I mean, we see how these cross-promotional and cross-network issues have stifled several situations for the PBC in the past, so you do have to wonder, would they be willing to allow something like that for at least one fight so that one of their boys gets a title shot? Because, quite honestly, you guys ain't got shit for them to fight for. Yeah, no, that's the nature of the beast. Well, like I said, back to my original point. Golovkin crossing over to the DAZN side of the street was, I think we all kind of saw that coming. That was the logical choice for him. So let's see what he's going to be doing now that he's on the DAZN side of the street in the near future.
Particularly Errol Spence.
And I'm not saying that I'm expecting him to win. I'm just saying that he's who I've had my eye on now for the last year or so. You know, I think right now in my mind, whether he takes the belt or not, we will more than likely look to push the fight for him opposed to Mikey. But it remains to be seen, and Mikey's got me convinced that this is going to be a great fight. I'm going to be down there in Dallas. I expect everybody in boxing to be down there in Dallas. I don't expect if I try to get in the ring, there's going to be anybody hold me back saying, hold on, let me go first. If I want to get in the ring, it's going to be my decision to do that. And I expect, you know, if I do decide to do that, that whoever that winner is or whoever I'm calling out, they'll be more than willing to accept that challenge and say, you know, Manny's a great fight, but here's a great fighter in front of me. I'm going to fight him.
So you're thinking about doing that?
Of course I am.
Yeah.
I did it once and it worked out for me.
That is the WBC champion Shawn Porter discussing the potential matchup between himself and the winner of the Garcia versus Errol Spence fight, and how, you know, he's not saying that he's picking Errol Spence to win, but if Errol were to win, the fight between Errol and Shawn would be more likely than the fight between Mikey and Shawn. Because who's to say that if Mikey wins that fight against Errol, that he's even going to stay in the 147-pound division?
He might not.
Who's to say that he would campaign there from there on out? It's conceivable that if by some chance he were to pull off this miracle, he might still vacate the title like he did at 140. You know, he didn't hold on to that IBF title at 140 pounds. And if by some chance he were to upset the plans for Errol Spence, monumental upset that it might be, it is within the realm of possibility that Mikey vacates that title shortly after winning it. Mikey Garcia doesn't really have the physical dimensions to continuously campaign as a welterweight, even in the event that he would have upset the plans for Errol. So yeah, I think it's possible that even if Mikey were to win, that don't mean he's going to campaign at 147 every fight thereafter. Now, in the event that the fight works out the way that I think it's going to work out, that, you know, Errol Spence proves to be too much for Mikey Garcia and he ultimately starches him, in the event that happens, what is the likelihood that a Shawn Porter fight would come thereafter? Well, you gotta realize something.
Pay attention.
If it comes down to Errol Spence versus Shawn Porter or Errol Spence versus Manny Pacquiao, which fight do you think he's gonna prioritize? Which way do you think he's gonna go when he has both those options on the table? Manny Pacquiao said that he may be in attendance for that fight, likely scouting the winner. In which case, if he's scouting the winner, that's an indicator that he is perceptive to fighting the winner of that fight. So if Manny is kind of for it, if Manny is seeming receptive to that fight, I could definitely see a situation to where Errol deprioritizes Shawn and anybody like him and focuses on a Pacquiao fight, because Manny Pacquiao has a bigger name than Shawn Porter. He's got a bigger name than Shawn, bigger name than Keith, bigger name than Danny. All these different guys that didn't want to give Errol Spence the time of day in the past, Manny has a bigger name than all of them, and he seems receptive to fighting the winner of that fight. So perhaps Shawn Porter, you know, while he might be acting receptive to that fight now, this is a case of you snooze, you lose, because that fight was actually there for you for some time, and you, among others, did not seem as receptive to that. So I'm not expecting Errol Spence to prioritize a Shawn Porter fight over a Pacquiao fight, even if it's a unification fight. I mean, seriously, it hasn't been the quote-unquote strap season. It hasn't been strap season in a long time, and I don't think it's gonna be now that Manny is scouting the winner of that fight.